Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Talking shop in District 4 week in, week out. My name is Brandon Baney, and today we've got a special cameo appearance by Al Bundy. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on? I had a hard time thinking of an intro, and I saw my guitar sitting there, and I go, I haven't done that yet, so let's do it. And then you got Al Bundy with a little bit of polka. Come on. That's got to be the intro of all intros.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Scott Burton with us. His moniker today is Al Bundy. He was, a running back for Polkai? Is that what the story was?
He was an all-city player, once scored 4 touchdowns in one game.
Yeah.
Legendary.
And then became the greatest shoe salesman mankind has ever known. So, yeah.
Oh, by far. And there's a certain art to that. And Al Bundy crafted that art to perfection.
Of course, married with children, very popular in the 90s. Scott wearing the Polk High football jersey and busting out the acoustic guitar today. I didn't even know you could play, Scott. So that's really impressive.
I didn't either. No, it's back in the day, Brandon. I was in my 20s. I was in a band once, a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
I need that. We need the VH1 behind the music on that.
There's just good. I'm just very thankful that there wasn't cell phone video, because nothing you do now isn't recorded. Back then, I think, growing up in the 80s, it's a good thing things were not recorded, right? Because there's stuff that would not go over well today.
People ask all the time, hey, has society just gotten worse over the last 30 years? I'm like, no, I think there's just more people documenting society. I think people have always been generally pretty terrible, and now we're actually seeing it more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Things haven't changed that much. As far as that goes, people are still shady and they're going to do bad things. Now it is just, you can't get away from not being recorded and documented. You're right.
Yeah, well, we're here to record and document some of the great athletic exploits of our Magic Valley athletes. And Scott, we had so many thrilling football games from this past week, but I want to start on the volleyball court with a team that I think is flying under the radar a little bit, and that's Canyon Ridge. The Riverhawks are one of the favorites in the Magic Valley in the 4A ranks, along with Twin Falls, to get to state. But last weekend, they went over to the Peg Peterson volleyball tournament. Over 30 teams were there competing at Highland High School in Pocatello. And I'll be darned if Canyon Ridge didn't walk out of there with that first place trophy from the gold bracket. What a weekend for the Riverhawks.
Well, the way that they did it was kind of the fun part of it, because they lost their first match and had to work all the way back, because it was a double elimination tournament, and they, got to the gold bracket. Anyway, they lost on Saturday morning, and this is a team that doesn't really play well in the mornings, like most teams. And all of a sudden they found themselves in a loser's bracket. And through that journey back, they had to beat Highland twice and did it. But that included playing 8 matches in a row to win the tournament. And so, those last few matches down the stretch, they were just kind of loopy and everything. Everybody's so exhausted, but somehow they figured out how to win. And it really is a good springboard for this Canyon Ridge team who, when you talk volleyball 4A in the state of Idaho, you're talking Skyview and everybody else. Is that right?
Yeah, take a number.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, Canyon Ridge has got it going on. This is a really good team. This is a team that when, Coach Norlander took over, these girls were freshmen, so this is their 3rd year together. And this is a team that has really gelled very well over the years. And, this is the group that kind of helped put Canyon Ridge on the map volleyball wise, because they really hadn't had very much success, so when they were freshmen, they kind of kicked off their way with a 16-14 record. And that was the first winning record that Canyon Ridge has had in a long time. And then last year, 22-9. And then they lose one senior and they get all those girls back. So you're right. This is a team that could fly underneath the radar because they've got a lot of pieces.
Yeah, you mentioned Coach Lindsay Norlander and what she's done in a short time with these athletes. You look at the roster and right away you're like, man, they've got some size with Maddie Bland at 6 feet even. And you got Ava Martin at 6'1", and Abby McLean at 6'1". McLean has signed to play with Idaho State University D1 program. So, I mean, when you've got 6 foot, 6'1", 6'1", you can do some damage.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you don't get a lot of. I mean, you don't get a lot of tall girls to begin with in general, but when you do, you've got to make sure you get them doing something, right? And that is just something and a luxury that Canyon Ridge has right now, because it makes it really tough at the net because they can challenge you. You know, they can also score the net with that size, but it makes it really difficult when you've got 2 6-footers as blockers and you're trying to get over the top of that. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so all of those matches that they won at the Peg Peterson tournament, including beating Highland twice, and Highland's no joke. Highland's a good team. To beat them twice, none of that counts on the resume, the quote-unquote official resume, because tournament results in season don't count towards your overall win-loss record or your Max Preps rankings. So the first official result that they had, Scott, was earlier this week against your Jerome Tigers in a 3-0 sweep.
Yeah, you know, and the young, undersized Tigers battled really, really well, losing that second game 25-22, I believe, or 25-21, and then competing in those other games. It's just that Canyon Ridge is so much better and physically better than everybody else. But the thing about Canyon Ridge is they've got some depth, you know, and that's going to play a dividend down the stretch. I mean, you take this Peg Peterson tournament, for example. You know, they weren't at full strength early on. You know, they were missing one of their starters for the first match on Friday, and then 2 starters for their second match, and then they've got kids coming off the bench all the time. And you know, and talking to Coach Norlander about the weekend and everything, one of the things that she alluded to was the fact that, man, they're deep. They are deep. Not only are they tall with a great starting lineup with, you know, McLean and Bland and Ava leading the way, they've got some depth.
Well, the match I've got circled on the calendar is next Thursday, Scott, a week from today. They will host Twin Falls in that crosstown battle. And I mean, we know what kind of program Twin Falls has had over the years, including the last team that wasn't named Skyview to win a 4A championship. So I'm really looking forward to that crosstown matchup. That should be a lot of fun. So,
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So congratulations to Canyon Ridge on winning the Peg Peterson Memorial Tournament over there at Highland in Pocatello. No small feat, and the fact that they lost right away and then ran the table just makes the story so much better. But it's one of just a large size of incredible stories that we had from this past week, Scott. Let's shift gears to football now, where we had some really wild games. I promise we're not going to talk about the Wendell Trojans every week unless they just keep doing incredible things. But we talked about Wendell last week because they were one of the few teams that had a week 0 game. They get that win over Cold Valley Christian. We're like, all right, these guys, you know, might be ready to take that next step. Well, they go on the road to play a West Jefferson team that I think people would tell you is not as good as Cold Valley Christian. And Wendell struggles a little bit in this game. It ends up being a back and forth affair, but it comes down to a walk-off field goal. Wendell wins 17-16 as time expires.
Yeah, you're talking field goals in a 2A football game. You don't get that very often at 2A. You don't get it in 3. You don't get it in high school very often. 5A maybe, but boy, a battle of field goals in this, which was great. And even though West Jeff wasn't the caliber that they played earlier, it's just you got to find ways to win ugly. And if you're gonna win, you have to understand too, you're not always going to have your best game week in and week out, but the good teams find a way to get it done, even when they don't play well. And, this is a team that West Jeff, had them on the ropes. They were, got out to that 3-0 lead, and then it was back and forth. But, West Jeff scored with about, a minute and a half to go to take the lead. I mean, it was 16-14, and there's 90 seconds left to go. And this is a game that Wendell hasn't played well in. Now, all of a sudden, you haven't played well for so long. You have 90 seconds of good football in you when it matters the most. And they did. They marched right down the field and they kicked the game-winning field goal, and they tiptoed out of there with a win. And that's what good teams do.
Yeah, they'll take it. And I guess I should say it wasn't his time expired. I got my walk-off field goals mixed up. Emmett had a field goal as time expired as well this week. 6 seconds were left on the clock. Julian Ponce comes in and nails a 35-yard field goal. And that's no small. That's in high school, a 35-yard kick. That's big league.
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, you don't see a lot of kickers in high school, especially, that lower level, able to do it. So I don't know what they thought was going to happen when they trotted Ponce out there, but obviously they had enough confidence in him that he's able to make this kick. But 6 seconds to go, you don't have much of a choice. And boy, he came through big time. I can imagine what he was going through, lining up for a game winner. Good for Wendell. We touted them early on, and so far they've delivered 2-0.
Yeah, Wendell was up 14-7. West J scores the touchdown to make it 14-13. They went for 2, didn't get it. They kicked at that field goal. So they scored, 9 unanswered points to take that 16-14 lead. And then Wendell marched down the field. Jesse Chavez, 129 yards and a touchdown on the ground for Wendell in the win. Alex Herai also hit Jackson Maddox for Wendell's other touchdown. And I'm telling you, Coach John Helmendaller's got a good thing going there in Wendell. It'll be interesting to see if the Trojans can keep it rolling. Of course, just the
Marsing.
team, against Marsing, the team that won pretty big in their opener, 66-6. They're coached by former Boise State linebacker and Chicago Bears linebacker Shea McClellan.
Yeah.
So we've got between McClellan and Helmendaller, who are both great players, now doing the coaching thing. That's kind of cool to see too.
It really is. And if you follow football in Idaho, and in particular Boise State football, to have a guy like Shea McClellan running the show, especially at a small school like that, is pretty exciting, because the knowledge that he got from not just Boise State, but from playing with Chicago in the NFL, and just that is so exciting to have. And I'm really interested in this game with Marsing and Wendell next week.
Yeah, that'll be Wendell's home opener as well.
Tonight or tomorrow night, right?
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Home opener for Wendell as well. So that'll be really exciting to see. Okay. Second week in a row, we're going to talk about Kimberly as well. I promise we're not going to hit the same teams every week, but these are just the teams that are really making things exciting. So you've got a matchup of teams that I think are going to be in the playoffs and be in the mix. Kimberly traveling to Snake River. This was a wild game. Snake River takes a 3-0 lead on their opening drive, took a lot of time off the clock. That's all right. They kick off to Mason Jensen. He takes it to the house. He makes a house call, Scotty, and just like that, without even running a play on offense, Kimberly was up 7-3, and that kind of set the tone for the back and forth battle that would ensue.
Yeah, it did. And right after that, it was Cade Larson and Jensen hooking up for a 47-yard touchdown. And now all of a sudden, Kimberly's on top 13-3, in control, but Snake River had something to say about that, because they got back out in front with another field goal, their second one of the game. And here we go with field goals. And then a couple of passing touchdowns. Peyton Williams, one to Seacrest and the other one to Walker. And next thing you know, Snake River with an explosion back up on top. And now Kimberly's got something to kind of fight for, because they're down 20-13, and there's not a lot of time left.
Yeah, we're in the late stages of the game. And how about that wide receiver from Snake River? His name's Johnny Walker.
Yeah, right. Is it red or black? I'm not really sure.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, there's 2:55 to play. Kimberly is down 20-13. They get an 18-yard touchdown run from Damon Taylor, who really ran the ball well in this game for Kimberly. So they tied the game at 20, but Snake River's got the ball back, and they've been moving the ball pretty well. Well, all of a sudden, Kenyon Hernandez comes away with an interception. Kimberly gets the ball right back. and it's Taylor scoring again, this time from 6 yards out with just 56 seconds to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got to kick off the Snake River one last time. What's going to happen? It's like deja vu. It's Kenyon Hernandez again coming up with an interception to seal the win.
Yeah, again, it's almost like a mirror of what we just talked about with Wendell, just finding ways to get it done in the end. Now you're gonna say that, the games don't matter coaches are always going to tell you that it's not going to be one play that does it. It's going to be making the plays when it counts, right? And no matter what happened, no matter how bad you think you played, no matter what went your way, what didn't, if you're still in it down the stretch, well, that's the time to step up and make those plays. And, Kimberly did it, and Wendell did it. And now Kimberly is going to take their show on the road tomorrow night when they visit Jerome. And this is a really good Kimberly team. And we talked about this last week. Very athletic, skill position wise, they are legit. If there's any knock or weakness on them, maybe it could be up front in the trenches. But with all the skill kids they got back and the athleticism they have, they're going to be trouble for anybody. And tomorrow they come to Jerome, where they visit their old head coach, Rich Bishop.
Yeah, the Bishop Bowl. That'll be interesting. Rich Bishop coached at Kimberly for such a long time, now at Jerome. So yeah, Kimberly is 1-0. They start the season off with a win in a 27-20 win in which they were down 20-13 with 3 minutes to play. And that's just in high school football. It's not like the NFL where you can make up a multiple score deficit because you get a 2-minute warning and all these other timeouts. That's hard to do in high school. And so good on Kimberly. So we've seen Kimberly get a wild win. We've seen Wendell get a wild win. We saw Wood River pull one out of the fire 2 weeks ago. This is only going to help these teams get better as they are all fighting to get into the playoffs and advance in the playoffs. And so it's good to see these Magic Valley teams, having some fortitude early and figuring out ways to win.
Oh, absolutely. That pays off down the stretch. And we talk about it all the time. We see the teams that cruise through a regular season, whether it's football, basketball, whatever. And the first time they get challenged, whether it's a district or state, they don't know how to handle the adversity. But the more you can put yourself in those situations, the better your team is going to be down the road.
Yeah. So speaking of Jerome, they found themselves in a tight battle with Gooding last Friday. So it's the first quarter. Gooding puts together a pretty nice drive. The sun's still out. Robert Bailey scores on a 4th and goal play. And by the way, I went back and watched the film of that. It seemed like they had like 12 plays right there at the goal line and just finally get it punched in on a 4th and goal. Robert Bailey scores. The quarterback, Braden Martin, runs in the 2-point conversion, and it's 8-0 Gooding. And I'm like, okay, here we go. First quarter. Let's settle in. 8-0 the final. That was it.
Yeah, I was there, and it was a very interesting game despite the score. I mean, Gooding scores on their opening drive, and then we're done. And that was all. But, you have to be able to be a fan of the game, a student of the game, to understand and see what's going on behind the field, right? Because you've got a Jerome team that's coming off a winless season. They've got a new coach breathing new excitement, a new offense, brand new scheme and everything that they're trying to learn. And it's going to take some time. And so what you're looking for is something beyond the score. You're looking for the effort. You're looking for, are these kids buying in? Are they finishing plays? And they may not have the best dudes on the field. And bottom line in football, you don't win if you don't got dudes. You can have the best coach, you can have the best scheme, you can have best whatever. You don't got players, you ain't going to win. So you're looking for all these little things. And from Jerome's perspective, you saw some things that you hadn't seen before, or at least lately. And that was kids hustling and rallying to the football. Standing there, trying to make the tackle over a bigger guy and just holding on for dear life. Making a right read, but maybe not getting the arm and the throw behind it, but they're seeing things. And so you saw some positivity there. And going back and watching film on this, the mistakes that Jerome was making in particular are fixable. It was about guys being out of position, but it's a new scheme. And so it's going to take time. In talking to Gooding, they recognized the same thing. They just said, hey, you could see that the Bishop influence is there because, Gooding and Kimberly played forever in the same conference. And so they're used to seeing that. They know what they're looking for. And they saw bits and pieces of it. And they go, okay, it's just going to be a matter of time before this starts to click, whether it's this year or the year after, whatever. But you can see pieces of it. Meanwhile, Gooding, they're relatively new too. They've got Coach Bauman in his second year trying to establish a culture that they want. And the more that I study these two teams, the more that they really kind of mirror each other in philosophy, because for Gooding's side of things, they want to do things the Senator way. And so what they're doing is they're bringing back a lot of old players from Gooding. Jerome's done the same thing. Rich Bishop's is a Jerome grad. And then a handful of assistants are Jerome grads. Well, Gooding's doing the same thing. Gooding is really focusing and trying to keep their players accountable for being good in the classroom, not being late and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. What Jerome's doing the same thing, because our players sign a contract with their teachers saying that, hey, they're going to be good citizens, keep their grades up, because that's the most important thing. So when you look at the score and you look at the game, it wasn't exciting from a fan's perspective, but if you know the backstories and you know what you're looking for, that game had a lot to it, especially when you got these two teams, relatively new coaches to that school, trying to establish their own culture.
Yeah, the parallels are striking, where Gooding was going through this same thing that Jerome is 2 years ago, where Cameron Anderson, who had been the longtime coach there and had a lot of success, leaves to take a different job. Bauman, who was the boys basketball head coach and had been an assistant football coach, becomes the head football coach now, and he gives up the basketball part to Ryan Pope, who knows a thing or two about basketball. So that's kind of a win-win for Gooding.
Yeah.
But he is kind of trying to put his own stamp on the program at the same time, paying respect to those great Gooding players of the past. It sounds like it's exactly what Coach Bishop is doing at Jerome. And as you were talking about that, the other school that has done this recently that stood out to me was Buell with Alan Reynolds. Kind of the same thing, a former Buell player coming back to his old high school, bringing back those Buell players from the past. And it's kind of cool to see this little revival in some of these Magic Valley programs.
Well, and I think one thing that's lacking in society is really a sense of pride in anything. Everything that we do is disposable. Nothing really has value anymore. Everything is made to be broken, including stuff that we buy, our attention spans, our relationships. It's all not lasting. And so with that comes this lack of pride that you see throughout. And if you're involved in athletics in the school, one of the things that's going to drive your bus is a sense of pride in what you're doing, and you want your kids in your school to walk the hallways with a sense of pride that you are a Jerome Tiger, you are a Twin Falls Bruin, you are whatever you are. But we don't see that as much anymore. And so bringing these old school people back, when they have a sense of pride, can help really establish that culture that was or is that particular school. And I really think that's why this is happening.
Yeah, it's really cool to see kind of this revival in the Magic Valley. Now for Gooding and Jerome, gets a little tougher, right? We talked about Jerome's got to play Kimberly. Gooding's only got to play Homedale. That's not a big task or anything. But like you said, wins and losses, it's easy to get lost in that. But the process of where teams are and how they're getting there is also very important. I don't know if my internet just went out there, but it probably froze for a second.
You're glitching a little, my friend, but that's okay. I got you.
Hi, caramba. All right. Let's talk a little 8-man football. Castleford was hosting North Gem last Friday, and we had talked about, I was really interested to see how this game was going to go for Castleford, because they had the dirty dozen last year, 12 players on their roster. 8 of the 12 graduate, 4 come back. Okay, that's half the team, but where are they going to fill in? It turns out, Castleford's just doing just fine. They roll to a somewhat easy win, and they're 1-0 to start the year.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a young team and playing at that level, you don't have a lot of guys running the hallways that you can pull from, and so you're just hoping that you're getting guys out there so you have a team. And when you lose what Castleford lost last year, you're thinking, okay, we're not going to focus on winning. We're going to focus on just keeping football alive. And I tell you what, they've got a lot of freshmen that are starting for them, obviously, because of their lack of returners. And boy, did they step up and play well. I mean, they were responsible for, 4 touchdowns and 18 tackles between the freshmen, and really freshmen. And they really learned a lot from their seniors. Their senior, Jamie Ramos, I mean, he kind of led the way, 15 carries, 151 yards, and a touchdown to go along with 143 yards passing for 3 touchdowns. But when you got that kind of leadership, your freshmen, your young players are going to fall in line. And so really, I think the development of these young kids falls on Ramos. And then senior Cash Keach, he's the guy on defense that's going to lead the way. And so you've got these 2 great examples, that Castleford is bringing back in Ramos and Keach. And Keach, 23 tackles, 2 forced fumbles in that game. That's what these young kids are seeing. And if they've got that kind of role model on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball, they're going to learn how to play the game right. And they certainly did against North Gem, winning 42-20.
Yeah, last year that Castleford team was so fun to watch, and really the past couple of seasons. My favorite player, he's now graduated, Gabe Mahana, because he wore number 77 and was a running back and did things guys wearing 77 shouldn't do. And that was my number in high school. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I think my new favorite this year, just based strictly on name, is the guy who scored the first touchdown of the season for Castleford, Crash Taylor. What a name.
Oh yeah. There's, back in the day when we were doing all the state basketball things, I guess it was Glenn and Gary that used to come up with the all tournament names, and that kind of disappeared. I kind of would like to bring that back at some point in some sport, but yeah, Crash Taylor, you kidding me? That's a great name. I also like Cash Keach.
Yeah.
And that's a good one too. But interesting thing about him, because you're bringing up, 77 as a running back, Keach is the guy that plays center for Castleford, but he's also the deep return man on kickoffs. You don't see that one very often.
Hey, that's 8-man football at its finest there. So good win for Castleford. Really a good week for the conference overall. Hagerman gets a win over Horseshoe Bend. You had Camas County go over to Rockland and really dispatch them pretty easily. The one team that lost that kind of opened some eyes was Dietrich. They were the team that everybody picked to finish first, and they lose to Garden Valley. So I don't know. This conference could be flipped on its head here. It shows what we know. It's going to be really interesting to see. And you're going to have a chance to see one of Castleford's main competitors this Friday, Scott, as we've got Hagerman hosting North Gem on IdahoSports.com. This same North Gem team that just played Castleford, they're going to go right back into the Magic Valley this time to play Hagerman on Friday night. Should be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, and it's one of those measuring stick games, because now that you've got common opponents, and especially this close together in the season, it really does provide what coaches call a measuring stick. Well, we did this against them one week, and the very next week they did this. So you're going to get a lot of that stuff going on. And, for North Gem, it's certainly a bounce back game. For Hagerman, keep the hot start going.
And for North Gem, Scott, talking about low numbers, they have 9 players total. They were counting on some freshmen coming out that didn't. 4 players that were on last year's team decided not to come out this year, and that'll cripple an 8-man program. Coach Corey Hatch says, I've got 9 guys. They're all really good guys, but I've only got 9 of them. So,
Yeah, and that becomes such an interesting juggling act, because, you're an injury away from not having a season, and you've got to make sure that you're not overextending these guys, because they're not coming off the field. And how do you do that and keep everybody healthy? It totally restructures the way that you handle practice and do practice, because you just cannot have that kind of stress on your body to practice for 4 days and then go play and not come off the field. So anybody that's been in that situation with low numbers, it changes the way that you approach things.
Definitely. So if you want to see a contrast, North Gem with 9 players at Hagerman, who's got over 20. It's Friday night on IdahoSports.com, 7:00 kickoff there. Other games involving Magic Valley teams, Scott, on the IdahoSports.com schedule. Twin Falls Bruins fans will get a chance to watch their team. They are traveling to Ravston Stadium to play the Idaho Falls Tigers. This will be a really fun matchup. Both teams are 1-0. Twin Falls had an easy time. Idaho Falls, did you hear about what happened with their game, Scott, at all?
Fill me in.
Okay, so they're playing Thunder Ridge last week. The game starts at Thunder Ridge's stadium. Really bad weather.
This is where they had to switch venues, right?
Yeah, bad weather comes through. They have to switch to Ravston Stadium where the weather was calmer. They get over there. Thunder Ridge is down 2 scores. They return a punt for a touchdown. They get a game-tying touchdown. The game goes to overtime. We're past midnight at this point. We are into Saturday morning. Idaho Falls finally wins in overtime, 34-28. It was a wild game.
That's right. I did hear about that. You know, the weather pushing you out, and then of all things, it's overtime. Yeah. So no, I did remember hearing about that. Yeah. No, this game, Twin Falls and Idaho Falls, should be a good game. I mean, these are really 2 pretty good teams. We've already talked about Twin Falls and everybody that they're bringing back, and winning dominantly last week in week 1. When now they get to go on the road and see how good they really are against an Idaho Falls team that, you know, won a really exciting game. So, yeah. You know, and then you've got the battle in Boise coming up as well.
Yes, I was going to say 2 other teams that won big in week 1 were Oakley over St. Joseph Catholic School from Utah, and then Burley, obviously putting up over 70 points against Mountain Home. And we will be broadcasting all 3 games from the battle in Boise, from the blue turf, the Smurf turf at Albertsons Stadium on the campus of Boise State University. This is a really cool deal, Scott. This is exciting, not just for the Magic Valley, but for the state of Idaho.
You know, it is. I mean, you liken it to the Rocky Mountain Rumble in a way, because this is a showcase event. And, you know, you've got, you got 2 of the 3 games featuring Magic Valley teams, Kendrick versus Oakley and Burley and Valley View. But I think the interesting sidebar is that you've got Gatlin Bear for Burley headed to Boise to play on the blue. And you know he's the talk of everything. And there's Paul did a really good interview yesterday with head coach Cameron Anderson from Burley, talking about this, and then a little bit about the Gatlin situation with Boise State and whatnot. And if you hadn't had a chance to go listen to it, do so. It's really interesting, and the both of them do a really great job. But I think that's one of the side stories of this. Obviously, Gatlin to go play at the Blue, and Burley taking on Valley View, and you know, Valley View. You know, they're the ones that got beaten by
Twin
by Twin last week. That's right. Yeah, they got blown out by Twin. That's right. And then Burley blows out Mountain Home. So that one, and then you've got Kendrick and Oakley. And Kendrick coming off of the season that they did, boy, quite possibly one of the most dominant seasons in history at that level. And here they go against Oakley. So that would be a really fun game to watch. And I'm looking forward to watching all of these on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah, Kendrick and Oakley at 3:00. And then you've got Fruitland and Emmett at 5:30 or 6. Let me double check the times. And then the late game is Burley and Valley View at 8:00. Late kickoff there from BSU. And yes, Paul did a great interview with Cam Anderson from Burley. He's the guy who kind of spearheaded this effort and said that there's been this disconnect between Boise State and the high schools for a long time. I feel like, Scott, you've lived here longer than me, but Boise State has just seemed kind of aloof and not really part of the Idaho high school sports scene, which is crazy to me. And this is maybe a good way to mend that bridge a little bit.
I think it is. And I think the idea behind this does exactly that. You know, you certainly love hometown kids, home state kids. There's something about it, finding a gem in your home state. That's the gem state. See what I did there? But this particular thing, you're right, has not happened to build that bridge between Boise State and the rest of the state. And so if this can continue to happen and grow, then I really think you'll see a difference in the way Boise State approaches, you know, high school sports in Idaho. And I think Gatlin Bear is going to have a lot to do with that. You know, by him going there, kind of opens the door and leads the way for other, you know, standout high school players in Idaho to follow. But when they're watching star players in Idaho bolt and go somewhere else, like, you know, Colston did to Michigan, and no, nothing on him. I mean, it's Michigan, for crying out loud. But when you see that, and not these high calibers going to Boise State, he's like, well, I guess that's really not what I should do. I think Gatlin kicked in the door, and I hope that more do that, because back to that pride thing that we just talked about, having a little bit of pride in your state, a little bit of pride in your school that's in your state. I mean, I hope we see more of it.
Yeah, Gatlin Bear really an ambassador when you think about it that way. As is Cameron Anderson. He wants to do bigger and better. I think ultimately he wants 6 games, 1 for each classification, which would be awesome. But
why not?
At least in year 1, this is a great start. So yes, you can check out that interview on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page. But also, Scott, I'm going to take that interview and put it into the podcast feed here on the Magic Valley Prepcast. So those that listen to the podcast, you'll have that standalone interview. It's a little bonus content in your podcast feed as well, because it was a really good interview. So
yeah, absolutely. You bet. A lot of insight to that. And if you can't get up to Boise State, then make sure you hop online and watch these games. I'll be stuck in the booth at our football game, or heck, I might be up there calling those games with somebody, but I'll be having it on my computer as I'm working my own game.
Yeah, I'm going to be at an 8-man game on Friday night, not Oakley Kendrick, which Kendrick won last year 52-48. Basically, it was whoever had the ball last won, and that was Kendrick. Speaking of, we have started up again, Scott, the Idaho 8-man Prepcast. It's our podcast we do each week dedicated strictly to the 8-man game. It's myself and Will Henneke, and we brought on a new guest contributor this year, former Carey coach Lane Kirkland. It's been great.
Boy, what some insight that he's going to bring. And I saw part of that first one, and that's a unique perspective. I mean, some guy that's been there forever, and the family's been there forever, and the in the trenches and bringing you all of that kind of stuff, man, that's going to be a great addition to the 8-man Prepcast.
Yeah, he's kind of picked up your gig. He contributes on the podcasts for the Carey home games. He's up in the crow's nest on the mic. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I know it. That's what we do. I was mowing the football field today for a few hours, so I couldn't decide if I was going to be Al Bundy or if I was going to be, Carl Spackler, or Greenskeeper Willie or whatever. I mean, but I essentially decided on Al Bundy because it's football season, and I'm probably going to mow the football field every Thursday anyway, so it doesn't matter.
There you go. Well, thanks for tuning into the Magic Valley Prepcast. It's perfect if you've got to go mow the lawn. Pop us on, and the time will fly from listening to me and Scott. So, you know what? It's funny. Real quick, one more thing, and then we'll get out of here. I was talking to, this was a couple of years ago, Randy Spaeth, the athletic director at Raft River, and he said he likes to listen to the Prepcast when he's on the mower. So
yeah, I run into Randy all the time. Such a great dude and a big fan of the show. And in fact, I just can't say enough about the schools in this valley that tune into this. I mean, it's just, everybody knows, everybody watches. It is so cool to run into these people and have them just kind of give you, hey, great podcast this week, or hey, you gonna cover our game, or whatever the case is. They're watching and they love it. So these Prepcasts are amazing.
Yeah, and we'll be back again next week to talk about the biggest stories happening in the Magic Valley. But until then, enjoy the competition this weekend, everybody, for Al Bundy and Scott Burton. He's going to play us out.
Okay.
I was going to say, I'm
in tune right now. I'm not even sitting correctly, but you get the gist.
Yeah, that was really good. A good playoff. I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time. Sans Guitar on IdahoSports.com.